Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Raw Sport interview. I am your head of sport, Josh Sim, and then to my left on this screen, we have our former head of sport and championship enthusiast, Bristol City fan, Kylan Stillwood. Kylan, it's been a while. How have you been, mate?
It has been a while. As you can tell, my hair's grown into sort of like a João Felix look. It was very
Oh,
short at the start of the lockdown. It's nice to be back on Raw Sport again. I've missed out on it over sort of the last 10 or 11.
yeah. And oh, is he frozen? I have no idea. Um, I'll add him back once I think he's fixed. And we've got Ryan Conway. Sorry, Ryan, about this. Who is the beauty of this is the beauty of live streams. This is the beauty of doing this all live. Obviously, you are the Derby County correspondent for the Athletic. We hope to get Kylan back at some point. And how are you doing, sir?
Yeah, I'm not doing too bad, thanks, mate. Thanks for having me on. It's warm. It's too warm, but we're doing good. We're all right.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to put this down here. Yeah, it's been obviously it's been several, 3 months or so without football. And in the league, like the championship, obviously every game at this stage is obviously it's vital. Every time you can pick up a win, or every time someone drops points, and you have a chance to capitalize. So, what have you made of? I guess the championship was started last week. The Premier League's been back same weekend, I believe. What have you made of English football's return as we bring Kylan back on? What have you made
My
of it?
apologies.
All right.
It's been interesting. There's been a couple of games, particularly in the Premier League, a couple of games that have been sort of duds. But I think that comes with we're not used to seeing sort of all the 3 o'clock kickoffs, live on TV because of the blackout, which for a time being has been lifted. So I think that was always going to be expected, that there was going to be quite a few games that didn't light your fire, for lack of a better phrase. But yeah, overall, I think it's been all right. The Tottenham United game was fun. The City Arsenal game was fun to a point, and then the sort of final 20 minutes just sort of petered out into nothingness. And I think that's where you really miss a live crowd, although no crowd in existence could have got Arsenal back into that game. But I think that just where you miss a bit of live atmosphere with, maybe City fans enjoying it, the Olays and all that sort of stuff. And it's been interesting for the Championship. Similar sort of deal, really. And I think the Championship is a bonkers league anyway. And I think this sort of 9-game, almost like a mini season, promises to be equally as insane. I mean, we saw it with Leeds losing 2-0 to Cardiff. And then that playoff race is so tight. I mean, Derby are down there in 12th, and they're only 3 points off the playoffs, off Preston in 6th. That just shows you how close it's going to be until the end of the season. But it's been fun, and I've enjoyed its return.
Yeah, absolutely. I did want to ask. Hang on. You were obviously at it was at Millwall, wasn't it? Derby played at Millwall.
No, I wasn't there.
Were you not?
For personal choice, I'm only going to home games.
Okay.
But I still watch the away games.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. We will definitely. I mean, we'll get on to. Obviously, there was one player who stood out for Derby, made quite the splash last week. I guess before we get into more specifics in terms of the Championship and Derby, what do you think? Because obviously this season will go down in history as a weird, as certainly I won't say a weird one, but one that was unusual in terms of the break and the interruptions. So, what will you kind of personally remember this season for? Do you reckon?
I can only sort of speak because a lot of the times when other Championship games are on, I'm watching Derby, so I don't really get to see a lot of the other Championship stuff unless it's highlights here and there. So yeah, it remains to be seen how the season will end for who is sort of going to be crowned champions. But we're either going to be talking about Leeds United finally going up, or we're either going to be talking about Leeds United staying in the division, in which case it'd be another season in which Leeds didn't get it done. And I think that is the prevailing storyline. I think how Slaven Bilic has come to West Ham and how he's managed them. And I remember they came to Pride Park very early on in the season. It was a 1-1 draw. It was a half decent game. And I remember saying at the time that once Bilic got his fingerprints all over that team properly, that was going to be a very, very good team and was going to challenge them. Still think that squad is slightly aging and they look set to lose Nathan Ferguson. But yeah, I think the way that West Brom have pushed Leeds all the way and could still win the title as well, the championship as well, is very interesting. From a Derby perspective, well, we have to wait and see because there are many outcomes for the season.
Yeah, absolutely, and as you said, there are. If you look at the table, there are two teams who, well, seemingly would have gone on to definitely stake their claim for promotion early on, but now with this break and a few mixed results last weekend has definitely thrown it into a little bit of doubt. And we bring Kylan back in.
Can I just explain the reasons for my absence? My phone has just overheated twice, so I placed an ice pack behind it now. I feel like that sums up the weather down here in Bristol. But hopefully I will be in for the remainder of the session now, so my apologies again.
You know what? This is perfectly encapsulates what university student radio is. It's perfectly encapsulated, so I'm not even mad. I'm honestly loving it. So, I mean, since we've got you now, we can talk a bit about the championship, and we'll start with a bit about Derby County, because obviously that's what, Ryan, you write about predominantly.
It's what I only write about. Not even predominantly. It's what I only write about, man.
Yeah. We can start with last week. Obviously, the big kind of talking point was Louis Sibley's his hat trick for Derby. He's just 17 years old.
He's 18.
Oh, is he 18? My bad. Were you surprised with his performance at, were you surprised that he was going to score a hat trick at so quickly into his young career, essentially, in the championship?
Yeah, I mean, if you asked anyone on planet Earth, anyone that packs out Pride Park, is Louis Sibley going to score a hat trick in his second game? It'd have been like, oh, hang on, let's just pump the brakes a minute. I think everyone was surprised by that. That isn't an assessment of Louis Sibley's ability. That's an assessment of where he is in his career and how difficult it is to score hat tricks. So yeah, I think that was a surprise. What isn't a surprise is how good he is. And again, I kind of speak from a sort of insider perspective, having been in the hubs of Derby County all year. But to a casual viewer, this guy has burst onto the scene. But if you know his road and path at Derby, this is of absolutely no surprise. This isn't people expecting, wow, I didn't expect him to do that. They thought some people in the club thought he was ready last year to step up to the first team. Obviously, Frank Lampard had Mason Mount in there, and at the time, Bradley Johnson was there. Tom Huddleston was in and around the team. He's been down with injuries this season. So there was too much competition for places last year at the time. This season, he's been held back a little bit until the turn of the year. I think he was still training with the under 18s and 23s age group, and then Koku threw him in a couple of cup games early on, and then he got his first start against Blackburn, in which he gets his debut goal, which is a screamer from about 25-30 yards, and then he picks up where he left off not long after with a very, very good performance against Manchester United in the FA Cup, in which him and Scott McTominay just go at each other all game, and it's great fun to watch. Two really good young players just stepping up to the mark and not backing down at all. That's great fun. So yeah, I don't think it is of any surprise of how exciting he's been. Of course, the goal return is a bit surprising. I don't think anyone expected 4 goals in 2 league games. But in terms of what he brings, his quality, I think that's Derby fans will have known that about him for a long, long time.
Yeah, and obviously he's the latest in. I mean, Derby's academy has produced a lot of great players. You see the likes of Max Birds playing, getting more and more opportunities. So there's definitely there's definitely like a pathway, should we say? So you say that inside the club they rate him very highly. Is he? I don't want to make you rank say all these young players that are coming up, but is he seen as one of the brightest per se of these players that are coming through the academy?
Yeah, look, it'd be unfair on me to say, well, he's better than him,
Yeah.
because they're all like, Max Bird does not play the same position. Their qualities are totally different. Sure. So how would you rank one over the other? What I will say is Philip Cocu held his press conference not long ago and said he's a unique player and a unique person, and he has abilities to do something very, very special in the game. Now, you don't really need me to add anything else after that. That's come from Philip Cocu. Wayne Rooney rates him very highly, as he does Max Bird. In fact, Wayne Rooney thought Max Bird could make a push for an England spot in the next year. And let's not forget Jason Knight as well. I think in football we're obsessed with what's new. Jason Knight was the first of these to get his league start under Cocu against West Brom in August, and he was excellent and has continued to be very, very good. So there's also him to account for. He's a bit of a Swiss Army knife. He'll play as a holding midfielder. He'll play on the right, left. He'll play as a 10. He'll sort of do a bit of everything in midfield. But in terms of Sibley, when Rooney's talking about you very highly, when Philip Cocu's saying you have the potential to do special things in the game, I mean, what I say wouldn't really add anything much more to what they already think about him.
Yeah, and obviously you've got him on one end of the spectrum, on the very young side of the spectrum, and then, as you said, Wayne Rooney is at Derby County on the other end of the spectrum. Were you surprised at all that he made the decision to come to Derby County? I know this was in January or so, mid-season, but looking back on it now, were you surprised that he decided to come to Derby County?
Were you surprised he went to Derby? I think we were all surprised. We were also, if you'd have asked me, if you'd have said Wayne Rooney will turn up at Derby County on the 6th of August, I'd have rolled out of the room laughing, because it felt like something out of a Football Manager save. It was crazy. It was a surprise. I think it was evident by all of the English media descending upon Pride Park, all the social media going absolutely insane. And it is still weird now. It is still weird to be like, Wayne Rooney plays for Derby County. I don't think that weirdness sort of truly leaves you a little bit. But I think it's very, very good for the club. It's good for Rooney, because let's also remember he's doing a player coach role. So he's getting his coaching career off the ground there as well. It's good for the young players. Some on the other side of the coin would say that, is it an assessment of where his career is at in his 30s? When you look at Ronaldo, who's of a similar age and is still at Juventus, you look at Messi, who's just turned 33 and still at Barcelona. I know Daniel Taylor did a piece on The Athletic looking at sort of had things gone differently for Rooney, and this isn't necessarily him looking after or not looking after himself. It's a case of he just absolutely tore around the field, and he's got a lot of tread on the tyres. And if things had gone differently, injuries here and there and all sorts of things, would he be playing still at a Premier League level? If you want to ask that question, I think it's a fair question to ask. But on the positive side, it's great for local media. It's great for the Championship. It's great for Derby. Pretty good for a lot of people.
Can I just ask what? Because I was actually at the game at Ashton Gate. I watched Bristol City versus Derby when we won 3-2, and watching Rooney on the field. I mean, you could see he was above all of the rest of the players. Even if you hadn't told me he was Wayne Rooney, I would have picked him out as the best player on the pitch by far. What sort of impact do you think he has had on Derby County? Because we look at where they are now this season. They're doing. I mean, I just said they're down in 12th. They were playoff finalists last year. I mean, do you think he has made up sort of the loss of all of the good young talent, or do you think there's still plenty more that needs to be done to sort of bring Derby back to where they were?
Yeah, I mean, you say Derby are down in 12th, but in terms of points, they're only 3 off the playoff.
Yeah.
So it's, but yeah, I think he's added an incredible amount, and in sort of November, December time, there were questions about where would he play? Would he play as a striker? Would he play as a 10? And at the time, it was sort of, he might play as a holding mid, but it didn't really work for him when he tried that, I think, at Everton and Manchester United when Louis van Gaal tried it. So the consensus was he's either going to be a striker or a number 10. Philip Cocu tried him as a 10 against Barnsley, and while they won that game, it felt a little bit disjointed. And you weren't sure at the time whether it was a combination of adapting to a new team or his fitness, because he's always been a player that takes just a couple of games to get up to speed, or both. And then since then, Cocu dropped him back into a holding role, and he's just run the show because he's allowed so much more space and time. He's still, at times, you still see a touch of the old Rooney where he absolutely tears around the field, but dropping him further back means that he doesn't have to do that, which is beneficial to everybody. I think he has helped mask a lot of cracks that were in that team when Frank Lampard and all them lone players left. The team had a lot of holes in it, and we look at Mason Mount, Kyle Tomori, Harry Wilson. Those three players could have conceivably played at Premier League level last year, not necessarily for Chelsea, but they could have gone on loan to good Premier League teams last year. They were major coups for Derby this year. They were holes in that squad that needed plugging, big holes. Not helped when Richard Keogh was sacked for his part in a drink driving incident in September. Rooney plus Max Bird plus Matt Clark getting up to speed, loan signing, who had a good start to the season and then a bit of an iffy one and then gets injured against Forest. Since returning from injury, he's been outstanding. Tom Lawrence, since the turn of the year, has been wonderful. He had a really, really rough spell, sort of October through to December, where he was quite poor in my estimation. So him picking up his form. I think just since the turn of the year, Rooney's signing has coincided with a lot of things just sort of clicking for Derby. I think the easy take is to say it's Rooney, but actually a lot of things have gone right for them to get them in a position where they are still in the playoff hunt.
Yeah, I just thought of a question literally as you were saying it. You mentioned the drink driving incident that Richard Keogh that ultimately meant he stepped away from the club. What was it like to report on? And I know we'll talk about more journalism type questions later on, but I did want to just ask, what was it like covering Derby County at that time? Because obviously it felt like the eyes of that, certainly more eyeballs were on Derby at that time, just because of that that one incident and the repercussions that came after it. So what was it like covering them at the time?
Yeah, I mean, let's be clear here. He didn't step away. He was sacked. We have to make that perfectly clear.
Yeah.
That was an incredible time to report for me, because at the time I'd only been doing the job a couple of months. So covering a drink driving case was interesting, because obviously you find out that when something like that happens, naturally, just everyone puts the barriers up, the defence shields up, and it's tried to be kept as tight as possible. And the club. Not just Derby, any club that has something like this happen tries to control the narrative of what happens, and obviously that is fine, because essentially they have to do a little bit of damage control PR wise as well. It was difficult to report on, because one guy has been sacked, the other two were brought in front of a court of law. We heard in the court case that Tom Lawrence had developed a bit of a dependency on alcohol to give him confidence. It was heard. He was struggling after the loss of his mother, and on a personal note, I could relate to that massively, because I'd lost my mum at the same age that he lost his. I could relate to how low that he was feeling. Mason Bennett, by all accounts, a very bright academic. It was hard journalistically, you have to do your job, but you remember that, there's a person there that has made an awful mistake. There's a person there that has gone through serious depression in Tom Lawrence's case, a person who is very bright and made an awful mistake in Mason Bennett, who sadly then compounded that when a video was leaked from his private Snapchat driving past Pride Park screaming, fucking Bernadette. Bright academic, but perhaps lacking in other areas. And then obviously there's Keogh, which is just an awfully sad story. He played over 350 games for Derby in all competitions. You know, he was the captain. He played in all 10 playoff appearances that they've made since he was there. It was very strange. It was difficult for me, you know, only being in the job a couple of months. So yeah, all of that was, and fans as well. When you're reporting this on social media, everyone chips in, and because they have their opinions, rightly as well. But it does make it hard to try and digest so many voices being thrown at you at once. That makes it very tough as well. So yeah, it was difficult.
Yeah, and I will. We definitely have some questions for you about, you know, the experience, because obviously, for those who don't know, you've joined the Athletic in August, I believe. So you've been in nearly 10 months or so on the job. So yeah, we will definitely.
I started in July, but that was sort of,
yeah.
We launched in August, but obviously we all had the
Sure.
staff and whatnot in for July, just so we could get a few pieces. So the website didn't launch up, and it was just like there's nothing there. So a few of us had been working a month or so before the launch.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and obviously you covered Derby County. You've had a chance to study Philip Koku's kind of come in as the new manager from obviously, you know, he had a pretty good playing reputation as in the Netherlands and played for Barcelona. What have you made of him in the managerial hot seat overall, when you kind of look back throughout this season? And has it been a case of, has he grown into the role? Has it been a case of he's just needed time to just kind of work out like how to incorporate his best players into the team? What have you made of his spell so far?
Yeah, it's got better. You know, there were a couple of very early shoots. You know, the away win against Huddersfield, which was good. They snatched a point against Leeds when they had no real right to get anything from that game. They were massively outplayed in the first half, but managed to get a point. They beat Preston in November, really convincing. Well, it was 1-0, but it was a very convincing 1-0. But there have been some lows as well. They were hammered 3-0 against Nottingham Forest in the second round of the Carabao Cup, which I felt a little bit sorry for him because he was still learning his squad. And we you know, Frank Lampard and Chelsea and Derby really dawdled getting the deal to get Lampard to Chelsea over the line. It meant that by the time Koku was hired on July 5th, he had 4 weeks between being hired and his first competitive game against Huddersfield. And his team was in America. Now, he didn't, you know, and he wasn't best pleased that he was taking control of a pre-season that he had no, you know, didn't really book or anything like that. Wouldn't matter whether it was Philip Koku, Pep Guardiola, me, you, whoever. 4 weeks is not enough time to get to know your squad, and that's why I felt a little bit sorry for him about the hammering against Forest. I understand why fans were furious with him for that, and that, you know, that's but that feels a very long way away now. In November through December, they were pretty poor. Didn't win in 7, got a point against Wigan on Boxing Day, and then after that, they've been pretty good, to be honest. Barring a very poor, I thought, away 3-2 defeat against Luton, in which they took the lead, and Wayne Rooney, who wrote in his Sunday Times column, was furious after that game, and rightly so. They shouldn't have surrendered that lead. They were poor against QPR away, in which they lost. But apart from that, they've been pretty good. They drew 1-1 at home against Fulham, in which they played some champagne football at times, and probably should have won that game. At the time, I thought a draw was a fair result, but having watched it back, I thought they should have won that game. And in their last 3 league games, they've scored 3 goals, and at times they've carved their opponents apart. It's taken a while, and there's been some errors in there as well. Bristol City at home, they lose the game 2-1, but the second goal, Keller Roos plays a pass out to Scott Malone, and Malone gets himself in a little bit of trouble and tries to twist and turn out of it, and eventually gives the ball up, and Bristol go and get the second goal with Andy Vineman with a very good finish. Against Forest, the 1-0 defeat, Jayden Bogle plays a stray pass across his 18-yard box, and Lewis Graben, I think it's Graben, just fires home from the edge of the area. Sheffield Wednesday, a 1-1 draw, similar kind of scenario where the ball is given away cheaply at the back. I think 3 touches later, the ball is in the back of the net. There's been issues implementing this system, but it looks like they've got it now. And I think credit to Koku, credit to his players. for making that work, because at times it looked like they weren't going to get there. There's been times where he's been, I thought, a bit too cute with his selection, chopping and changing personnel, changing with formations, and that's cost them points, I think. But no, I think he's been afforded time rightly, because his record at PSV spoke for itself. 3 Eredivisie in 4 seasons, and a domestic cup as well. His identity is there now, and I think it's starting to click, and I think everyone involved deserves an awful lot of praise for that.
Yeah, and as you said, they are. You say they're 12th, and to someone who doesn't know the championship, 12th sounds quite far off. But as you said, the championship is a very competitive division. I guess I know we've got some general championship questions to come, but my final question centered around Derby is that obviously you become the Derby County correspondent, and you know that there's been a managerial change, and as you said, a very late one, or at least one that didn't prepare them as best as they could for this season. Do you think where they are at the moment, and obviously you can take this by league position, you can take this maybe by how the squad's developed under Koku's managerial skills, do you think this is on par or where you thought that they might be at obviously pandemic aside at this stage of the season with 9 or so games to go, or did you think that they would be? Where are they now in terms of where you thought your expectations at the start of the season?
I think I actually had them as 12th right at the start of the season.
Oh, really?
But I have revised that and think that they might finish 10th, which would be a top half finish. I think as projects go, and it is a project, that word is thrown around an insane amount, but this is a project because Derby are looking to lower their wage bill, lower the average age of the squad, promote their youth, and get that conveyor belt of youth team players through to the first team. And Koku is here on a 4-year deal. It is a project. I think as sort of phase 1 of projects go, if they were to get a top half finish, Blood, Louis Sibley, Max Bird, Jason Knight, we forget Jaden Bogle's only 19. He was blooded last year under Lampard. Lee Buchanan's had some starts. He got injured and went back to the 18s. He was a little exposed against Brentford as well, and went back to the 18s. Jamal Hector Ingram is now training with the first team squad. I think he's got 22 goals for the under 23s. As first years of projects go, you get a top half finish. Maybe you sneak in the playoffs, but you get a top half finish. You've blooded 5 or 6 youngsters. That's an exceptional, in my opinion, that's an exceptional sort of year 1. It then means that there is pressure on year 2 to take that next step, because there will be an expectation to take that next step. Give Max Bird a full championship season under his belt. You have Wayne Rooney for a full championship fixture, full championship season. Louis Sibley will be expected to play a bigger part. So Jason Knight as well. So there'll be more pressure on year 2. But I think if they were to finish top half, I'd consider that a very good season.
There you go. And currently they are on track to that. I mean, you talked about their 2020, their second half of the season. They've only lost 3 times in 2020, and I think they're unbeaten at home since in this calendar year, at least, albeit, yes, pandemic beside. But that is a very, that is a remarkable turnaround. But one team that they've kind of lost both games against was Bristol City, one of the rare teams they've done the double. And I know, Kylan, I'm going to open the floor to you now. I know you've got some questions on both Bristol City and the Championship, so I'm just going to let you kind of take it away.
Yeah, I'll start with just sort of some general questions, because we've obviously focused on one team for quite a while. I mean, Derby, I think I was going to mention them before I actually knew that you were a Derby reporter anyway, because I think they're quite a good example of sort of the chaotic nature of the Championship, in that you can finish one season in a playoff final, and then the next thing you know, you're down in 12th. I know it's 3 points off playoffs, but it doesn't look likely that they're going to get it. And then equally down the other end, Hull City have been historically quite a solid Championship side, now find themselves in relegation zone. Why do you think, compared to the Premier League, for example, where you have your big 6, you have sort of the teams that you can sort of map the table from the very beginning of the season, why in the Championship is that pretty much impossible every single year?
Because in the Premier League, the financial muscle power of teams is wild. Your rich get richer every year, and you're sort of, I won't say poor, but you're less teams that don't have the same financial muscle either get weaker or have to keep stretching and stretching just to basically tread water. You have to have, I mean, Leicester City are an almost too perfect example. They won the title, and all the riches that very rightly garnered them, they pretty much used to make sure that they were sort of never going to be relegation battlers again. And now, you look at them now and they've gone from strength to strength. But that was a freak year, a complete freak year. So I think the reason you can pretty much map out your top four, your top six, whatever it may be now, compared to the Championship, is quite simply money. Sheffield United this year are the exception, exceptionally well coached, and even they spent 20 million on Sander Berge, who at the minute is struggling to settle in a little bit. But yeah, for the large part, I think money plays a massive factor in that.
Do you think that, given sort of the increase in money in football as a whole, that the Championship will start to adopt a similar approach to the Premier League, whereby we sort of see a division between the top 12 and the bottom 12 start to develop financially? Or do you think they will continue to be the same?
Not particularly, no, because the money afforded to the EFL as a whole is just not the same. It's just not the same level as what it is in the Premier League. So I don't think you can plan, or I don't think teams can plan to spend all this money. And again, teams want to get into the Premier League, and if you sort of go up and then go down, it looks like we may see that with Aston Villa. You're then forced to offload all your top earners and so on and so forth. So I think, and Derby, I think this is the reason Derby are moving to a more sustainable model, because they've been bitten with this themselves, where they've signed players on big money, on big contracts, and it is not sustainable. So no, I don't think the Championship will go the same way. Okay. Not unless there is a ridiculous influx, and we're talking ridiculous influx of cash.
Okay, focusing then on sort of obviously my team, and I think one of the richer clubs, Steve Lansdowne, is in sort of like the top 10 richest men in Britain, I think. And yet Bristol City find themselves for 12 years. 12 years ago, we made the playoff final, lost to Hull back in 2008. And since then have not ever got the top six, despite a huge new stadium, which quite frankly is quite embarrassing to sit in at the moment, when you think it's like 30,000 and we're playing against Luton Town and drawing 0-0.
I went there, obviously, when Derby lost to them 3-2 in February. I went there and I remember thinking, the stadium is impressive and it's huge. It's also quite empty. Yeah.
But what do you expect? Because you can't expect to fill 30,000 when you're coming, 11th, 12th in the Championship. So why, in that specific case, despite the injection of money, despite some pretty decent signings, and we broke our transfer record for signings and for selling players last summer, and yet we still find ourselves in sort of very disappointing scenario. So why do you think that is, despite the high amount of money that's been injected into the club?
I think they're soft.
In what sense?
I don't think they've got much backbone about them. You look at their last win was against Derby. Now, even in that game, you look at that game and you sort of, Derby were the better team, I thought, until Bristol scored. Just before half-time, 5-6 minutes before half-time. And then Bristol City sort of blow them out of the water and go 3-0 up. But then once Waghorn restores it to 3-1, Bristol City just kind of completely wobble. And then they get a second goal back. There was a surefire penalty for Derby for handball, which wasn't given. But had that game gone 10 minutes longer, I'm under no doubt that Derby would have got an equaliser. And honestly, I'm an Arsenal fan for my sins. I have no vested stake in this. But I have no doubt that Derby would have got an equaliser had that game gone 10 minutes longer. This Bristol team is incredibly soft. They brought in Filip Benkovic, who Derby were chasing in January. They brought in Benkovic. And already Lee Johnson was questioning him after a couple of weeks of playing. They've they've lost against Blackburn last time out. They lost against Huddersfield. They got battered against West Brom. They got battered against West Brom at home. They got battered against Birmingham at home. They play some lovely football. They can't defend, and if you score the first goal against them, it's pretty much a given that you'll win, or at least take something from the game. Because, like I said, I just think they're soft.
So do you think it's not just a case of throwing more money at it? Because we've signed some experience. We signed Thomas Callas from Chelsea, Jada Silva from Chelsea, Casey Palmer from Chelsea as well. All like very good, solid players and good high-end championship players. Do you think it's just a case of change the manager, change the team, or just change the priorities?
You can change the manager all you want, but if you're going to keep hiring bad managers, I'm not saying Lee Johnson is a bad manager, but if you're going to keep hiring, if you sack 9 managers and hire 10 bad ones, you ain't going to go nowhere.
Yeah.
There's a clear deficiency in what they do. Now, it is not for me to say for sure what that is, but for me, there's a clear deficiency in mentality when they go sort of a goal down, or even when they concede a goal, they wobble. There's a clear deficiency there, and it's pretty obvious from the amount of goals that they concede that they kind of need to tighten up. Now, if you were to, let's say you were to sack Lee Johnson and bring in, I don't know, Chris Hughton, very good, solid, stable coach, knows set his Brighton teams up in the Premier League to defend well. Would that be an improvement? Maybe, but maybe they don't score as many goals. It's all about balance. But there's a clear sort of soft underbelly to this team, which I'm not sure just getting rid of the manager really, really solves. I mean, we've seen it at Arsenal. There's a soft underbelly to Arsenal. 3 managers later, there's still a soft underbelly to Arsenal. Getting rid of the manager doesn't always change everything.
No, it's a very valid evaluation, to be honest. I remember actually, we've mentioned Derby a lot, but the game that I was at against Derby, we were 3-0 up and then conceded 2, won 3-2 in the end. But I was shaking for the last 10 minutes, thinking that we're going to concede, because there's no trust. I think there's no faith in the team, because inevitably they almost always do crumble once we've conceded once or twice. My final question, then, leading on for that, I mean, I guess the most exciting thing I think for the championship for the remainder of the season is obviously the title race, but that's really a 2-horse race. The 3 playoff places are basically secured. So who do you think is going to get that final playoff place, the 6th place? Because I think there's about 8 or 9 teams in the running, Bristol City and Derby being 2 of them, and obviously Preston in there at the moment. Who do you think will end up grabbing the playoffs this year?
I mean, I tried to put that graphic down, but it doesn't cover the
5
or more teams beyond this. That's the thing; it doesn't stretch that far. But genuinely, when you do look at the table, it's crazy.
Honestly, what I will say is, whoever gets that last spot, I don't think they'll make it to the Premier League. I don't think they'll make it to the Premier League at all. And I think if there was any sort of justice, the playoff final would be Fulham versus Brentford. Because they have been the 2 best of the rest teams by quite some margin, in my opinion. You've sort of got West Brom, Leeds, Fulham, Brentford, and then everyone else. Who do I think gets that final spot? I mean, something tells me Cardiff, but I say it with absolutely no conviction at all. Swansea and Bristol. Swansea have the same problem I think Bristol City have, in that they're soft. Derby's run is a murderer's row of fixtures. They've still got West Brom to play. They've still got Leeds to play. They've still got Brentford. They've got Forest. They've got Cardiff. They've got Preston. I said that they needed 20 of 27 points on offer to them. They've got 3. I think along the line somewhere they are going to wobble and maybe just put those playoffs out of reach.
Millwall?
I think they'll struggle without the atmosphere of the Den. I think they'll struggle with that. I'm gonna say Cardiff, but honestly, I mean, I have no conviction when you look at 6 till 12. And if Derby were to get that, you would have to put into context how much of a run they would have had to have gone on to get it. If Derby were to get that 6th spot, they'll have thoroughly deserved it, massively deserved it. But I think it might be a bridge too far, and I'm going to say Cardiff. But like I said, I honestly have no conviction in that.
Yeah, and I think it's Kylan frozen. Oh no. I'm just gonna put him out of the stream again. I did have a question when you talk about when Kylan asks about the finances of the championship, and obviously now in this COVID in what will probably be a post-COVID situation. Obviously, finances are going to be different for championship clubs now, and obviously they now have to plan for this. You talk about Derby switching to a sustainable model and how they're able to bring all these talented academy players through and give them first team opportunities. Do you think Derby are well equipped? And I know no one's going to come out of this COVID financial situation well, as perfectly as they can be, but do you think Derby are well equipped to deal with the shortfalls that are going to affect clubs for the next few years?
I mean, it depends because they've got an EFL charge precariously hanging over them at the moment for breaching the profitability and sustainability rules. For the record, Derby have always maintained that they are innocent, that the EFL ratified their agreement. Their statement after they got charged was incredible. I encourage anyone watching this to go and find that statement because it is just outstanding. It's as strong statements go. That was one of the strongest. They agree that they say that the EFL agreed and ratified all the sales. So there's that to take into context, but they are still under investigation for breaching FFP, as it were. So I guess none of us really know until that hearing has been concluded what Derby's financial situation looks like. I have always maintained that any team that has to sell the stadium to themselves, in what Derby did, can't be in the most terrific shape, financially possible. I've always maintained that Derby pay 1.1 million a year rent on a stadium that by rights I think they should own. So yeah, I think the movement towards a younger model, players with a higher upside, high resale value, has almost been necessary. It's just good that Mel Morris deserves a lot of credit for investing in the academy, and for the drawbacks I think that he has, and I don't think he's a bad owner by any means, but I think he's got certain deficiencies. I think he deserves credit for the work he's put into the academy, the funds he's put into the academy, and for bringing in a manager who is willing to nurture that talent, because then you cash in on them for big bucks and it helps you sort of become more sustainable. We saw it at Premier League level. Southampton did it for years and years. Brentford have done it very successfully in the Championship. Obviously, Neil Maupay being one of those players who came through. They sort of, theirs wasn't academy, but cheap recruitment and very good recruitment. So yeah, I guess we'll find out after the EFL charge how Derby look financially.
Yeah, I'll be interested to look at that statement. I mean, obviously, Hull City put out a pretty strong statement earlier this week in response to one of your colleagues' inquiry, should we say, for the Athletic investigation in Hull City, which is a great read, by the way, and I'd recommend that to people. And I guess this next question, I guess, transitions into the journalism side of what you've been doing. But has there been a memorable game that you've covered this season, or a memorable experience that you've had since taking on this role as the as a regular beat writer for Derby for the Athletic? Has there been a memorable experience that you can think of?
Covering the UEFA Youth League run with the youth team was fun because it culminated in they lost to Salzburg in Salzburg. Now, for me personally, I'd never been in a position where work had sent me away to do anything work-wise. So having the experience to go to Austria, and the backdrop was gorgeous, and being able to, because I'd followed every round of that youth league with them, it was just such a fulfilling experience for me to do that. And then the turnaround, because 24 hours later, I was then at Pride Park to cover the FA Cup 5th round game against Manchester United. That sort of 2-day span was incredible. I mean, I got off the flight at Gatwick, hopped on the train, whizzed straight home, threw my suitcase through the door, had a quick change of clothes so I was fresh, spun back round and headed straight back out. I was exhausted, but the adrenaline kept me going, and that 2 days were absolutely incredible. And Wayne Rooney's debut as well, because like many people, and maybe many Derby fans, I'd never seen Wayne Rooney play live until he turned up and played against Barnsley for Derby. So that for me was incredible to be like, oh, this, I'm watching Wayne Rooney. This is awesome. It was also like this is Barnsley against Derby, and I'm watching when the press box was packed, and like at the time, I think Derby was 17th, and Barnsley were 22nd, and you just sort of think this is insane. So that's an experience that'll always stick with me as well.
Yeah, and when you read all the pieces that you and your fellow colleagues at The Athletic do, obviously, at certain games, you guys will focus on a certain player. That's the angle you'll take, and how they perform, particularly in a certain game. And sometimes you'll look at a tactical alteration. How is it up to you to decide kind of what you want to cover, what kind of angle you want for a particular game? Is it something that maybe that you've been planning to do, like you plan over like maybe 2 weeks in advance and just kind of see how it transpires and then decide to cover that on the day for that game? Or how do you decide what type of angle to take when you're covering a game?
It's a little bit of everything, really. Largely, you're left to your own devices to come up with your own ideas. The editing staff trusts that if you're assigned to a club, then no one will know that club better than you. In terms of your team, your group, no one will know that club better than you. So you should pitch the ideas. Then you sort of you throw this ball around a little bit, and eventually you have a fully fleshed out idea, and you go and do it. Whenever the piece rolls out, sort of, is very, it varies. It depends what's current, what's present. If you might write a piece and then suddenly something massive happens and you think, right, well, we'll leave that and we can roll that out in a week, 2 weeks, whatever it is. So yeah, it's a very fluid process, which I like, because I like to think of myself as quite a fluid person. You do this thing here and then suddenly this thing happens. We have to go in this direction now. Leave that we'll come back to that. So yeah, that works for me, but it's always a collaboration. But largely, you're left to come up with your own ideas.
Yeah, and this is obviously. Am I right in thinking this is? I mean, you've done a few journalistic gigs. You've had work published in the Morning Star and the Metro, and you've been in the editor-in-chief of I had the name of Football News.
Frost International.
Yeah, that's it. I had it. Frost International. For someone, and you graduated in 2016, am I right, from the University of Huddersfield? So what was it like going from university? Because I know a lot of our audience some of them will be in a position now where they've just graduated from uni. Maybe they're looking to do sports journalism. What kind of steps did you take after university to continue pursuing a career in this industry?
Well, for me, it was a bit strange, and I imagine there won't be many listeners that have had my experience, because 6 weeks after I graduated, my mum died. So I didn't really do anything journalistically, to be honest with you. Just kind of stopped. Got a run-of-the-mill job doing data entry. Was battling severe depression. It was only I've been graduated 4 years now, but it's only been the last 2 years that I've really stepped up, picking my journalism back up again. But it was a case of, it's difficult. It's very, very difficult. You have to be insanely dedicated to get this, to make it in this. And make no mistake, I don't believe I've made it in this at all. This is my first job. If I mess up majorly, or suddenly I'm bad at writing, then I'm gone. Maybe not from work, but the sands of time you had in this game. If you've got staying power, then you're doing something right. I've done a year. I ain't shit yet. Let's get that straight. So yeah, it was difficult. It's tough. I went to conferences, and I was living in Leeds at the time. I'm in Derby now. I was living in Leeds at the time. So I was getting the coach everywhere, down to London. I was going to conferences, workshops. I was getting work experience here, there, and everywhere. The Frost International stuff, that was basically a second job. That I did sort of. If it was a quiet day at my actual job that paid me, I was sort of doing bits on the side, seeing if my boss was around, doing bits on the side. I was doing it at home, spending very little time with my loved ones. That is the trade-off to get into the business. That is the trade-off. Be prepared to make that trade-off, because in this business, in this game, in this industry, essentially, if you're standing still, you are going backwards, because if you don't do it, if you don't get on that coach, that train, if you don't do that free bit of work experience, someone will do it, and they won't care that you might say that you want it. We'll show that you want it. Get your ass on a train and get down to wherever you need to be. Get on a coach and get down where you need to be. Show that you are dedicated, because that is what will impress people that want to employ you. How far are you willing to go to get the opportunity?
Yeah, and I mean that is for sure. It is I don't want to say cutthroat, but like there are a lot of aspiring riders who would want to be in a position that you are in right now. What kind of advice do you look back on your journey, and do you think would there be any advice you'd give to your younger self now looking back? Is there anything that now you would consider changing at all?
No, there's nothing I'd change because I'm here. Because I'm here, and everything that I put into it, the past has led me to get here. So in terms of if I would change anything, nah, absolutely not. Advice, I'd probably tell my younger self to not take things so personally. I'm always my own worst critic, which meant when I got critiqued for my work, I always took it incredibly personally, because it was like I was already criticizing myself, and now you're here to basically compound my own misery. I always took that personally when I shouldn't have done that. Being passed over for jobs, while it sucks, and while I am still bitter about certain things, that's a bitterness that I work through, and I'm sort of fine with, because I'm like, well, I'm here now, and my job is awesome, so I have no reason to hate the opportunities I didn't get. But that was a chip that drove me for pretty much ever since I was in my third year of uni, and they encouraged you to start applying for positions, and I was getting turned down then. That was a chip that always stayed with me, because I believed I was talented enough. Wasn't the most refined writer nor person, talented enough. I always believed that. I just needed someone. How do I get my wife back? Take her for dinner, Luke. Yeah, so I was always sort of very in myself, and withdrew into myself when I got rejection letters and critiqued on my work. And yeah, if I had some advice, I'd probably tell my younger self, just don't take it personally, mate. You'll be fine.
Yeah, and it's certainly, I mean, yeah, I think everyone who writes, they look back at their work and they go, oh, I could have, rephrased it this way, or oh, I could have restructured it in a certain way. I get that as well.
I think every journalist has that.
Sure
I think if you ask any journalist, are you 100% happy with any article that you've ever written? A lot will tell you no, because they read it back over and think, I could have changed that here and there. And so I think that's something that always drives you to be a better writer, to always pick out things that you could have done better. I still do it. I still do it now. More experienced journalists than me have told me that they still do it. I remember in university, I can't remember the name of the journalist, but what he said stuck with me, is that he's never been completely happy with a single piece that he's written, because he reads it back and knows he could have always done it better. That's the similar mentality that I have. I'm incredibly pleased with a piece when I turn it around, and then I go back the day after and I read it and think, could have done this, could have done that, could have moved that there, could have done this. And it's all part of the process of making you a better writer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, well, we're just running out a bit of time there. So I just wanted to kind of give the last question be, I mean, obviously, football writers are incredibly busy at the moment. I'm sure you've got some pieces drafted up, ready to go. Is there a particular piece? I don't want to obviously have you give away all your upcoming pieces, but is there one coming up that you're particularly excited about putting out there for people to read?
There's one I put out this morning, which was a profile on Louis Sibley. I spoke to his dad, which was incredible. He's going to be a very special player. But no, I'm not giving anything away. What's
I mean, I didn't expect anything less. And yeah, that'll probably do it for us. My thanks to Kylan Stillwood for joining me, as always, and thank you to our special guest, Ryan Conway. His Twitter's on the ticker somewhere. There it is. So you can give him a follow, and we will be back on Saturday with our final stream for the university term, and we will be reacting to all the week's action. So hope to see you then, and hope you have a great day.